He walked down the hallway of May Enterprises as though he didn't belong, each step echoing in the vast, empty space. His uniform was faded, his presence invisible, just another janitor in the background of a corporate empire. But today, John Justice was about to break a pattern that no one had even noticed was there. The glass walls of the building reflected the hum of ambition outside, the city's skyline shining with promises of power and success. Inside, the air was thick with the energy of millions, of board meetings, contracts, and negotiations, where people like Evelyn May, the CEO of this towering empire, sat at the top. She was the epitome of wealth and success, a woman who commanded a multi-billion-dollar company, an empire built on cutting-edge technology and breakthrough science. Yet, behind the polished exterior of her corner office, there was a deep frustration she couldn't escape. Her baby, Lily, wouldn't sleep. Despite the wealth, the influence, and the best professionals money could buy, Evelyn found herself powerless against this one thing. 8 nannies had quit, sleep consultants had failed, and even the best therapists seemed to have no answer. It was a constant struggle, and no matter how hard Evelyn worked to keep everything in control, how many deals she signed, how many projects she completed, she couldn't make her baby sleep. The stress of juggling her high-powered career and raising her infant daughter was pushing her to her limits. She stood at the edge of her desk, staring at the digital clock ticking down to yet another failed attempt to soothe Lily to sleep. Evelyn tried everything: new strategies, sleep experts, and even gadgets, but nothing worked. The walls of the glass office felt like they were closing in around her, amplifying the quiet helplessness she couldn't shake off. Her breath was shallow, her hand trembling as she checked her phone for another missed call from yet another therapist. It wasn't just the sleep problem that plagued her. It was the feeling of failing as a mother. She had worked so hard to balance her career with being a parent, but now the one thing she couldn't control was her own daughter. The weight of it all crushed her heart as Lily's cries echoed faintly from the other side of the room. Justice moved quietly down the hallway, his worn-out janitor's cart trailing behind him with a faint squeak. The silence of the building was broken only by the sound of his footsteps. He was a shadow in this cold corporate world, unnoticed by most of the people who passed by. He had been working in May Enterprises for years, yet to the employees who rushed past him each day, he was little more than a background figure, just a man with a mop and a uniform. And yet, today, Justice wasn't just another invisible worker. Today, he would become part of something far bigger than the daily grind of cleaning floors. As Justice passed by Evelyn's office, he caught a glimpse of her through the glass. Her face was tense, her eyes filled with exhaustion and frustration. She paced, her hands running through her hair, her shoulders stiff with tension. It was clear that she was struggling, and though he couldn't hear her cries, he could sense her inner turmoil. John Justice knew something about loss. He knew about feeling invisible. He had lost his wife in a tragic accident years ago, and now he raised his daughter, Ella, alone. He had learned to carry grief quietly, to bear it without burdening others with it. But that didn't mean he didn't understand pain. And today, he understood Evelyn's pain in a way no one else in that building could. He had seen her many times, always so put together, always the CEO, always in control. But now, he saw her as something else, a mother who couldn't fix her child's pain. Justice stood there for a moment, looking at her through the glass. He wasn't one to intrude, not in this high-stakes world where the sharpest minds solve the world's problems, and where he was just a janitor. But something in him stirred, a feeling of compassion, of understanding. He walked to the door, his shoes muffled by the soft carpet. As he knocked lightly, he caught Evelyn's attention. Her eyes met his for the first time, but she didn't say anything. The silence in the room felt thick, charged with her frustration, her vulnerability. Without waiting for permission, Justice moved into the room. Evelyn, caught in the haze of exhaustion, handed him Lily, as if she had no other choice. She was at her breaking point. Justice didn't speak, didn't offer any words of wisdom. He simply took the baby into his arms, his hands gentle, steady. He didn't try to calm Lily with promises or distractions. He just held her, offering something that Evelyn couldn't provide, a quiet, unassuming presence. And in an instant, Lily stopped crying. Her little body relaxed in Justice's arms, and within moments, she was fast asleep. Evelyn stood frozen, staring in disbelief. She had tried everything, every solution, every expert, every gadget, but nothing had worked. Until now, this simple, unspoken act of kindness had done the one thing no one else could. Justice held Lily for a moment longer, his eyes soft with understanding. He didn't need to say anything. The peace in the room spoke louder than any words could. Evelyn watched, overwhelmed, as the miracle unfolded before her eyes. She hadn't realized until this moment how much she had been hoping for something, anything, that would help her daughter. It wasn't a miracle cure. It wasn't something that could be solved by a consultant or a pill. It was simply someone who cared enough to be there. In the silence that followed, Evelyn's heart softened. Her inner walls, which had been so carefully constructed to protect her, began to crack. She wasn't sure what to make of it, but she knew one thing. She had never felt more vulnerable than she did in that moment. She didn't know how to process it, how to accept the help, but she knew she couldn't deny the truth she had just witnessed. Justice's act of kindness had done what no expert, no amount of money could do. Kindness had worked where control and precision had failed. As she watched Justice place Lily back in the crib and tiptoe out of the room, Evelyn felt something shift inside her, a flicker of understanding. For the first time in a long time, she had witnessed something that made her question everything she thought she knew about strength, control, and vulnerability. But no one in the building knew the story of the man who had just held her daughter. No one knew that this janitor, this quiet, humble man, had once been a father who had lost everything. And as Evelyn stood motionless, watching Justice leave the room, she had no idea that this simple act of kindness was about to change her life forever. Sometimes the weight of our own expectations can hold us back from seeing the simple solutions around us. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to let go of control? If you can relate, leave a comment and let me know how you found your way forward. And don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Evelyn stared at the closed door where Justice had just exited, her mind swirling with the unexpected turn of events. Lily was asleep, the quiet in the room almost foreign to her, and yet she felt a weight in her chest she couldn't shake off. A feeling of relief mingled with something else, something unfamiliar, something she had spent her life avoiding: vulnerability. She glanced down at her daughter, lying peacefully in the crib, her small chest rising and falling in a rhythm Evelyn had longed for. She wasn't used to relying on anyone, especially not someone like Justice, the janitor, the invisible man who had somehow stepped into her world and done what experts couldn't. A wave of gratitude washed over her, but it was quickly followed by an uncomfortable feeling, a gnawing discomfort that she couldn't ignore. It was hard enough for Evelyn to admit that she was struggling. Being in control had always been her strength. It was the thing that had propelled her to the top of May Enterprises, the thing that had made her one of the most successful CEOs in the industry. But motherhood, especially the kind of motherhood she had with Lily, had shattered that sense of control. She didn't know how to fix her daughter's pain, and the inability to do so left her feeling small, despite all the power she wielded in the corporate world. As much as she wanted to call it a fluke, something deep inside her told her that Justice's simple presence had done more than any professional solution ever had. But asking for help again, especially from him, felt like an admission of weakness, of vulnerability she wasn't used to exposing. How could she, the CEO of May Enterprises, turn to a janitor for help? Evelyn's eyes shifted to her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen, unsure of whether to call Justice again. She wasn't even sure what she would ask him. Could she do that? Would it be crossing some line? A part of her felt ashamed that she had let herself get so close to needing help. But she couldn't deny what had happened. Her daughter was sleeping for the first time in what felt like forever, and the relief she felt was more than physical. It was emotional. Lily was calm. Evelyn was calm. Her internal struggle raged on for what felt like hours until the stillness of the office was broken by a knock on the door. Her head shot up. She wasn't expecting anyone. Evelyn opened the door to find Justice standing there, his hands holding a small tray of coffee, his expression as humble as ever. He wasn't here for fanfare. He wasn't here for recognition. I thought you might need this, he said softly, nodding to the tray, which was now offering a steaming cup of coffee. His eyes shifted briefly to Lily in the crib before returning to her. There was a softness in his gaze that felt like an unspoken offer of reassurance, as if to say, "I'm here if you need me." Evelyn's throat tightened. She had to stop herself from swallowing back the gratitude that threatened to break her composure. "Thank you," she said quietly, taking the cup from him. She wasn't sure what else to say. Her mind was still spinning from the fact that he had done what no one else could do for her child. Justice stood in the doorway, waiting for her to speak, his quiet presence filling the space. He was clearly aware of her struggle, of her hesitation, but he didn't push. He simply waited. And that was exactly what Evelyn needed. She took a deep breath. "You didn't have to do this," she said, glancing at the coffee, then back to him. I'm not sure what to say." Justice nodded, his gaze still steady but kind. "No need to say anything," he replied gently. "I just thought I could be of help, if you need it." Evelyn swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her emotions surge. She didn't know how to feel. She wanted to trust him, but trusting someone like Justice, someone she barely knew, was a different matter entirely. "You've already done more than I could ever ask," she whispered, feeling the warmth of his simple kindness wrap around her like a blanket. But as the words left her lips, another thought crept into her mind. What now? Her gaze met his again, and something shifted in the air between them, a connection that hadn't been there before. For the first time in what felt like ages, Evelyn realized that she wasn't just looking at a janitor. She was looking at a man who had seen grief, who had been through his own struggle, and somehow, through all of that, he had found the ability to help others. Justice's empathy was his gift, one that went far beyond what his job title implied. It was in the way he carried himself, in the way he looked after Lily, in the way he quietly offered his help without demanding anything in return. Her walls, which had been built so carefully over the years, were beginning to crack. She realized that she needed this help. She needed someone who could be a calm presence for Lily, someone who wasn't wrapped up in solutions or trying to fix everything. Justice had given her something invaluable, peace. But it wasn't just about the baby. The more she thought about it, the more Evelyn realized that Justice's presence, his simple acts of kindness, were having a far deeper impact on her own emotional state. He wasn't just helping Lily. He was helping her, too. Evelyn let out a breath she didn't know she was holding, and with a quiet, hesitant smile, she invited him in. I think I could use some help. I don't know what that looks like right now, but I need someone who understands." Justice's expression softened, and for the first time, Evelyn felt like she wasn't burdening him with her troubles. He simply nodded, his quiet strength surrounding her. And in that moment, Evelyn knew that something had shifted. The walls that had kept her isolated in her high-rise office were beginning to come down, brick by brick. Trust, a foreign concept to her in the past, was starting to form between them. Her dependency on Justice was growing, and though part of her still resisted it, another part of her felt grateful for this unexpected connection. Maybe this wasn't weakness, after all. Maybe it was simply what she had needed all along. Trusting someone else can feel like a leap of faith, but it's often in that leap where real growth happens. How do you navigate relying on others in your own life? If this story resonates with you, hit that like button and share your thoughts below. You won't want to miss what's coming. Subscribe to stay tuned. Evelyn sat at her desk, glancing at the papers scattered before her. Meetings, emails, calls, they all seemed so trivial in comparison to the calm that had finally settled in her office, thanks to Justice. It had been several days since he had first stepped in to soothe Lily, and although the baby was still struggling with her sleep from time to time, Evelyn had learned that sometimes just being present was enough. The quiet peace that Justice brought with him lingered long after he left. Evelyn knew that his kindness had become something she relied on more than she cared to admit. He wasn't just a janitor. He was something far more. In his presence, Evelyn felt an unspoken understanding, a connection she hadn't felt in a long time. Her dependency on him had grown since that first time he helped Lily. She didn't want to admit it, but she found herself seeking him out more often when she needed a break, when the stress of managing a corporation and a child became too much, when she felt the weight of her world crashing down on her. And yet, there was something she hadn't expected, the vulnerability that she felt when she let herself depend on Justice. For someone who had spent most of her life in control, the idea of letting someone else step in and take care of things was both comforting and terrifying. But as the days went by, Evelyn began to realize that asking for help didn't make her weak. It made her human. On a late afternoon, when Evelyn was reviewing documents and tried to finish up work for the day, there was a soft knock on her door. "Come in," Evelyn called, her voice tired but welcoming. Justice entered, as quietly as always, his janitor's uniform still faded from years of use. He didn't carry any expectation or fanfare. He simply brought his presence with him, an unassuming, quiet strength. "I thought I'd stop by and see if you needed anything, Ms. May," he said, his eyes soft as he noticed the papers and the growing stress on Evelyn's face. His tone was always respectful, never overstepping, but Evelyn had learned to appreciate the gentleness in his words. It wasn't just that he helped with Lily. It was his entire demeanor. He never pushed but always gave. Evelyn nodded gratefully, trying to mask the exhaustion in her eyes. "Actually, I could use a break," she said, running her hand through her hair, as though her thoughts were weighing too heavily on her. "It's been a long day." Justice paused for a moment, then approached with a slow, careful step. "I thought maybe we could take a walk for a few minutes. It might help clear your mind." His suggestion was simple, but there was a subtle invitation in his tone, a chance for them both to escape the confines of their roles for a moment and just be human. Evelyn hesitated, unsure. She wasn't used to asking for help, but there was something about his offer, that made her feel like it was okay to step away from the relentless demands of her job. And so, with a tired but appreciative nod, she agreed. They walked in silence, down the long hallway that stretched the length of the building. The high-rise office tower felt more like a maze today, the towering windows offering little relief from the harsh, overwhelming world beyond. But as they reached the elevator bank, Justice spoke again, his voice low. "You've been through a lot lately, haven't you?" he asked, his words carrying a depth of understanding that made Evelyn pause. She looked up at him, startled by the simplicity of the question, but also by the way it didn't feel intrusive. It was just a simple observation. Evelyn felt a lump form in her throat, but she quickly suppressed it. She hadn't expected to talk about her struggles, certainly not with someone like Justice, but she realized in that moment that maybe it was time to stop carrying everything alone. Vulnerability, she thought. Justice had taught her that vulnerability was not a burden. It was an opportunity to heal. She took a deep breath. "Yeah," she murmured. "I've been trying to hold it all together, but it's getting harder." They stopped by the window, and Evelyn looked out at the sprawling city below them. The lights twinkled in the distance, but inside, she felt like she was in a fog, distant, disconnected. Her life had always been about control, about pushing through challenges. But now, with Lily's sleep issues, with the mounting pressure at work, Evelyn felt like she was at a breaking point. Justice stood beside her, his presence steady and unwavering. For a moment, he simply observed her, but then he spoke in a voice so quiet it almost seemed like a whisper, yet the wisdom behind his words rang clear. "You don't have to carry all of this alone," he said. His voice wasn't patronizing or overbearing. It was simply understanding. Sometimes the hardest thing is letting go of the idea that you have to handle everything yourself. Evelyn turned to look at him, her heart feeling strangely lighter for hearing those words. Justice had a way of cutting through the layers of her defenses, and it wasn't because he asked her to open up. It was because he simply was there, offering a space where she could breathe. She struggled for the words. "I'm not used to not being in control." Justice's eyes softened, and for the first time, Evelyn saw something more than the man who cleaned the floors. She saw the man who had lived through loss and pain, yet still carried himself with dignity and strength. His quiet strength was not born of his ability to control, but from his ability to endure and continue, even when things seemed impossible. "You don't need to be in control all the time," Justice replied gently. "I've learned that life doesn't always go the way we plan, but it's how we face it, how we let others in, that makes the difference." Evelyn felt the walls around her heart crack just a little more, and though it felt vulnerable, it also felt like a release, a freedom she hadn't realized she needed until now. As they walked back toward the office, Evelyn realized that her dependency on Justice had become something more than just a need for help. It had become a source of emotional support, something she hadn't known she was missing. She had begun to see Justice not just as a janitor, but as a man with a depth of wisdom and grace that she hadn't expected. There are moments when just being there for someone means more than we realize. Have you ever had someone's quiet support change your perspective? Share your story in the comments. And if you found this chapter meaningful, consider subscribing for more of Evelyn's emotional journey. As the days passed, Evelyn's sense of relief became entangled with something she hadn't expected: dependence. It was subtle at first, a flicker of gratitude whenever Justice showed up to help with Lily, or when he offered his quiet presence during her moments of overwhelming stress. His kindness became an anchor in her stormy world. But as much as it brought her comfort, it also stirred something deeply uncomfortable inside her, a feeling she couldn't ignore. She had always been in control, the CEO of a billion-dollar company, a woman who could solve problems with the snap of her fingers, who demanded excellence from herself and those around her. But now, in the face of her vulnerability as a mother, she was increasingly finding herself relying on a man who had been nothing more than an invisible presence in her life until recently. A janitor. The more she leaned on Justice, the more she questioned whether it was healthy to allow herself to need him so much. Could she, the head of a corporation, really be dependent on someone whose role was so humble? Wasn't this just another sign that she was losing control, a concept she was both terrified of and obsessed with? Evelyn sat in her office late one evening, the soft hum of the city beyond her windows barely audible in the stillness. Lily was finally asleep, and Evelyn could breathe for the first time in hours. But the peace felt fleeting, overshadowed by the question that had been weighing on her mind all day. Was she relying too much on Justice? It wasn't just about Lily's sleep anymore. It was everything. Her emotional state, her growing need for Justice's presence, his steady support, felt like a slippery slope. The line between gratitude and dependence was blurring, and Evelyn feared that if she allowed herself to continue down this path, she might be giving up something vital: her independence, her identity as someone who had never needed help. Justice had always been there, quietly supporting her, never pushing, never demanding anything in return. It was impossible to ignore the depth of his unwavering kindness, the way he showed up day after day without any expectation other than to help. And yet, as much as that kindness comforted her, it also frightened her. She didn't know how to let go of the constant, tight grip she had on her emotions, on her need to always be the one in control. She stood up, pacing the floor of her office, trying to shake off the sense of discomfort that had settled in her chest. The feeling of vulnerability had begun to gnaw at her. She couldn't keep needing justice this way. Couldn't keep depending on him for her peace of mind. There had to be a limit, didn't there? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. "Come in," she said, her voice tighter than she intended. The door opened, and Justice stepped in. As always, he carried a quiet presence with him, his hands folded neatly in front of him. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, his voice gentle. Evelyn looked at him, the familiar rush of comfort washing over her, only to be immediately followed by that same sense of unease. She had asked for his help so many times now. Was it starting to cross some line she hadn't noticed? "No," she replied, her voice betraying her internal conflict. "I'm just thinking." Justice seemed to notice the tension in her posture, the way her eyes flickered with uncertainty. He stepped closer, his gaze soft. "Is everything okay?" Evelyn hesitated, looking away, not sure what to say. The last thing she wanted to do was admit that she was questioning her need for his help. But the weight of it was becoming too much to ignore. She struggled for words. "I'm not used to feeling this way. I don't know how to explain it." Justice waited patiently, giving her space to find her thoughts. After a moment, he spoke, his voice kind but firm. "You don't have to explain. I understand more than you think." Evelyn looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" Justice smiled softly. "I know it's hard to accept help. I get that. I know what it's like to carry everything on your own. But sometimes letting someone in doesn't make you weak. It just makes you human." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she stood there in silence, just absorbing his words. She wanted to argue, wanted to push back against the idea of letting go of control, but part of her knew Justice was right. She swallowed hard. "I don't know how to let go, Justice. I've spent my whole life building this empire, making sure that I'm the one who always has everything under control. And now, with Lily, with everything, I feel like I'm losing it. I don't know how to let someone else in. It feels dangerous." He stepped closer, his expression sincere. "You're not losing anything, Evelyn. You're just learning to share the load. You don't have to do everything alone. No one does. Not even the strongest people." Evelyn's eyes filled with unshed tears, though she quickly blinked them away. The weight of her emotions was becoming too much, but she couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to her like this, without judgment, without trying to fix her. Justice's words were simple, but they resonated deeply, echoing in a place she hadn't let anyone touch in years. "Thank you," she whispered, barely able to get the words out. Justice gave her a small, understanding nod. It's okay to need help. It's okay to not have everything figured out. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her body relaxing just a little bit, but the unease was still there, this fight inside her to remain independent. But she knew that Justice was right. She didn't have to carry it all alone. As he turned to leave, Evelyn's voice stopped him. "Justice, wait." He turned back, looking at her with curiosity. "Would you stay?" "For a bit." Her voice was quiet, vulnerable, but there was a clarity in her tone now. She wasn't afraid to ask for help anymore. "I think I need someone to just be here." Justice nodded without hesitation, a warm, comforting smile appearing on his face. "Of course." And for the first time in a long while, Evelyn allowed herself to lean into that support, to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to be vulnerable, and that her connection to Justice wasn't a sign of weakness, but the beginning of something much deeper. The hardest person to rely on can sometimes be ourselves. When was the last time you struggled with accepting help? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, and if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to hit that like button to let me know. Evelyn's thoughts had been a whirlwind ever since Justice's quiet presence had become a regular part of her life. At first, his kindness felt like an anchor, something to hold onto when the storms of her professional and personal life threatened to overwhelm her. But lately, it felt like something more. More than just help, more than just relief. She found herself looking forward to his visits, to the way he would show up with no expectation, simply to be there. He had been a steadfast pillar in her life when everything else seemed to be in constant motion. But that only made her more conflicted. The truth was, she didn't fully understand why he kept offering his support, especially when his life seemed so much more difficult than hers. He had his own grief, his own loss, and yet he continued to show up for her, quietly, without asking for anything in return. Evelyn could feel herself growing more dependent on Justice, and although part of her welcomed the comfort he brought, another part of her was beginning to question it. Was this what it meant to rely on someone? Was she imposing on him? Was it fair? And then, as if on cue, the internal battle inside her reached its breaking point. It was a late afternoon, the office lights dimming as the city below began to glow with the promise of night. Evelyn stood in front of her desk, organizing paperwork, but she couldn't focus. Her mind kept drifting back to Justice. She needed answers, needed to know why he had stayed in her life for so long, offering his support without any sign of obligation. She had been avoiding the conversation for days, weeks even, but now it felt inevitable. She had to understand. The door to her office opened without a knock, and there he was, as usual, standing quietly in the doorway, Justice. His presence felt like both comfort and a gentle weight on her chest. He was carrying a small tray of coffee, something she hadn't asked for, but he always seemed to anticipate what she needed before she could even express it. Evelyn looked at him, her heart beating a little faster than usual. "Justice," she said, her voice quiet. "Can we talk for a minute?" He nodded, stepping into the room and placing the tray down on the corner of her desk. There was a softness in his eyes, an unspoken understanding that she wasn't just talking about the coffee. "I've been thinking," Evelyn started, the words coming out in a rush, "about everything. About you, about how much you've done for me and Lily. I don't even know how to—" She stopped herself, suddenly aware of the vulnerability in her words. She had always prided herself on being in control, and now she was giving voice to the very thing she had avoided, her dependence on him. Justice didn't interrupt. He just waited, giving her the space she needed to finish. "Why do you keep helping me?" Evelyn finally asked, her voice trembling ever so slightly. She looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "You've been through so much. I don't understand why you continue to offer your help without expecting anything in return." For a moment, Justice didn't speak. He just looked at her, his gaze steady and understanding. It was as if he had been waiting for her to ask this very question all along. "Evelyn," he said softly, his voice warm yet filled with quiet strength, "I understand loss. I understand what it's like to feel broken. I've been there many times. But when you're in that place, you realize that you don't have to stay there. The best way to heal is through the smallest acts of kindness. Not because you want something in return, but because you know the power of being there for someone else. It's the only way I know how to help. Not because I have to, but because it heals me too." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she absorbed his words. Justice wasn't just offering help out of obligation. He was offering it because he understood. He understood grief, pain, and the healing power of kindness in a way she couldn't have imagined before. His words felt like a revelation, a light breaking through the fog that had clouded her thoughts. He wasn't helping her because he was some kind of martyr. He was helping because, for him, it was part of healing, both for her and for himself. She stood there, trying to process it all. Justice's quiet strength, his ability to offer so much without expecting anything in return, had become something more than just support. It had become a lifeline for both of them. She had thought of him as just a kind man, a janitor, someone to help with Lily. But now, she realized how much more he truly was. "I never knew," Evelyn whispered, her voice catching as the full weight of his words settled in. I never realized that kindness could be so powerful. Justice gave her a small, understanding smile. Sometimes we have to let others help us in order to find the strength to help ourselves. We can't heal alone. Evelyn's chest tightened, a mix of gratitude and newfound understanding swelling inside her. She had spent so long in her life trying to maintain a perfect image, trying to control every aspect of it. But justice had just shown her that true strength wasn't about control. It was about allowing others in, about sharing the burden of pain and loss, about trusting that kindness, no matter how small, could heal even the deepest wounds. A weight she didn't even realize she had been carrying began to lift from her shoulders. The walls she had so carefully built around her heart, walls of self-reliance and isolation, were beginning to crumble. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. Not the peace that came from perfection or control, but the peace that came from understanding the power of kindness and vulnerability. "Thank you," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper, the words heavy with emotion. "Thank you for helping me, for helping us. I don't know how to repay you, Justice." He shook his head, his expression gentle. "You don't have to repay me, Evelyn. Just keep letting me be here. That's enough." And in that moment, Evelyn knew that she would never be the same. She wasn't just healing because of Justice's kindness. She was learning how to heal herself. She was letting go of the need to control everything. She was learning that vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was a source of strength. As Justice turned to leave, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that the connection between them had changed her forever. That breakthrough moment changes everything, doesn't it? How has a small act of kindness impacted you or someone close to you? If this touched you, leave a comment with your thoughts and hit subscribe to keep following Evelyn's path to healing. The days following their conversation seemed to stretch out endlessly for Evelyn, each one forcing her to face emotions she had long kept buried. She had been so wrapped up in control, in the idea that she had to manage everything on her own, that she hadn't realized the power of vulnerability, the power of trusting someone else. It had taken just one moment of connection, one simple, unassuming act of kindness, for her to understand that she didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. That night, as Evelyn sat at her desk, her thoughts were interrupted by the faint sound of footsteps outside her office. She looked up, half expecting it to be someone from the team or an assistant. But when the door opened, it was Justice. He didn't announce himself. He never did. He simply entered, as he always did, carrying the familiar, quiet strength that had become so much a part of her world. He set down a small tray of coffee, his usual thoughtful gesture, then glanced at her with the same gentle eyes that had seen more than she could ever fathom. Evelyn felt a quiet ache in her chest. It wasn't the same frustration she had felt before, the irritation with herself for letting someone else help, but a softer feeling, a feeling of gratitude and something even deeper, admiration. "How's Lily?" Justice asked softly, his voice like a balm to her frazzled nerves. "She's doing better," Evelyn replied, offering him a small but genuine smile. "I don't know how you do it, Justice. You always know exactly what to do." Justice smiled, his expression humble. "I'm just here, Evelyn. I do what I can." For a long moment, they both sat in silence. Justice didn't rush her. He didn't expect anything. He simply allowed her to process her thoughts, the silence between them comfortable in a way that Evelyn had never known before. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, she wanted to talk. Tonight, she needed to understand more. Understand him, understand why he did what he did, and what that meant for her. "Justice," she said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, about how small acts of kindness can help heal. I've been trying to wrap my head around it." Justice turned his gaze toward her, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, but no pressure to continue. He simply nodded, his attention fully on her. Evelyn let out a shaky breath, unsure of how to begin. I've spent so much of my life trying to be perfect, trying to control everything, trying to fix everything. And the more I tried, the more I felt like I was losing myself. She paused, the words coming out heavier than she anticipated. I thought if I could just control everything, my career, my daughter, my image, that I would be strong. But now I realize I've been hiding behind that control, afraid of letting anyone in, afraid of being vulnerable. She looked at Justice then, his steady gaze never wavering, and continued, "But you've shown me something different. You've shown me that kindness, even the smallest kindness, can make a world of difference. It's not about perfection. It's about acceptance. And that, I think, is the most powerful thing." Justice's expression softened, but there was no pride in his gaze, only quiet understanding. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he watched her, as if he were waiting for her to process the truth of what she had just said. And in that moment, Evelyn realized just how much she had been holding back, how much she had been afraid of letting go. "You've taught me that, Justice," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's strength. And I've spent so much time fighting it, but now I see how much it can heal, not just for me, but for those around me." Her heart ached as the weight of the epiphany hit her. She had been fighting her emotions for so long, hiding behind the walls she'd built, thinking that vulnerability would make her weak. But in truth, it had made her stronger, able to connect, to feel, and to let others in. She looked at Justice, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't think I'll ever be able to repay you for what you've done, for the way you've helped me. You've shown me a kindness I didn't know I was capable of receiving." Justice stood still for a moment, as if the words Evelyn had spoken had pierced him deeper than she realized. Then, with a quiet smile, he shook his head. "You don't need to repay me, Evelyn. Just keep being open to kindness. It's in the simplest things, like the way you've just opened up to me. That's enough." His words, calm and wise, struck a chord deep within her. She had spent so long thinking that to need someone was to show weakness, but now she saw that it was the opposite. It was the small acts of kindness, the quiet support, the simple presence that had carried her through the darkest moments. Evelyn had been so used to keeping people at a distance, maintaining her armor, but now she realized that letting people in, even just a little, had brought her more peace than she could have ever imagined. "I've learned so much from you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I've been so afraid of being broken that I never realized I was already healing." Justice nodded, a soft, approving smile on his lips. "Healing takes time, but it also takes acknowledging the cracks. That's where the light gets in." Evelyn swallowed hard, the emotion bubbling in her chest. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly feel what she had been holding inside. The grief, the guilt, the pressure, it had all been so heavy, but now, in this moment, she was letting go of a piece of it. She had started to see that kindness was the thread that could weave everything together: forgiveness, healing, connection, and it wasn't a one-time act. It was a choice, something to be given and received every day. And as Evelyn looked at Justice, she realized that the man who had once been invisible to her was now the person who had helped her find herself again. Kindness has a way of transforming us in ways we don't expect. When did an act of kindness change your perspective? Share your experiences in the comments. And if you agree that vulnerability is strength, like and subscribe for more heartfelt moments ahead. Evelyn stood by the large windows of her office, looking out at the city stretching far below her. The bright lights and towering skyscrapers seemed to pulse with energy, but within her, there was a quiet stillness. It had been weeks since she had opened herself up to the kind of vulnerability she once considered weakness. And in those weeks, everything had changed. The bond between her and Justice had deepened into something more than she could have ever anticipated. It wasn't romantic, not in the traditional sense. It wasn't about grand gestures or intense emotions. It was simpler than that. Their connection was grounded in mutual respect, in an unspoken understanding that had formed between them. Justice's acts of kindness, which had once seemed small and insignificant, had become the foundation of Evelyn's emotional growth. Each time he stepped into her office, whether to help with Lily or simply to offer a moment of calm, she found herself more and more drawn to him, not because of what he could do for her, but because of the way he made her feel understood. The morning sun cast long shadows across the room as Evelyn turned away from the window. She had a meeting scheduled with her board members in an hour, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the usual weight of expectation bearing down on her. She wasn't chasing perfection anymore. She wasn't trying to control everything around her. Instead, she felt something else, a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The door to her office creaked open, and Justice stepped inside, carrying the familiar tray of coffee. There was something different in the way he carried himself these days, something that reflected the deeper connection they now shared. It wasn't just about his actions anymore. It was the energy he brought into the room, an energy that Evelyn had come to rely on. "Good morning," Justice greeted her, his voice low and warm. "I thought you might need some coffee before the meeting." Evelyn smiled softly. "You know me too well," she replied, accepting the cup from him. Justice nodded but didn't leave. He stayed, standing at the edge of her desk, observing her as though waiting for something. For a moment, Evelyn felt that familiar tug at her heart, the desire to open up, to share more of herself with him. She had learned so much about herself through their connection, and it felt natural now to turn to him, to seek his presence. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice quieter than usual, "about how much you've helped me, how much your kindness has changed me." She paused, unsure how to express what she was feeling. "I never realized how powerful simple acts of kindness could be. Before, I thought it was just about doing big things, about success, about achieving. But now I see it's the small things that matter the most." Justice listened silently, his eyes steady but warm. He had always been patient, never pushing her to open up, but always present when she needed to speak. His kindness wasn't in grand gestures, but in the way he quietly made space for her emotions, the way he showed up every day without needing recognition. "I didn't know how much I needed this," Evelyn continued. "I've been so focused on doing everything myself, on always being in control, that I forgot what it felt like to just let someone else be there, to allow someone to help." Justice finally spoke, his voice gentle, but carrying the weight of experience. "It's not weakness to need help, Evelyn. It's human, and it's part of healing. I've learned that kindness isn't about fixing someone. It's about being there, showing that you care, no matter what." Evelyn looked at him, her heart swelling with a newfound understanding. She realized that this, what they shared, was something real, something deeper than just the occasional kindness or simple acts of help. Justice's kindness had become a mirror, reflecting back the parts of herself that she had buried for so long. He had helped her reconnect with her own vulnerability, the very thing she had once seen as a flaw. She set her coffee down, her fingers brushing against the surface of the desk as she thought about the past weeks. The changes she had gone through were profound, but they had been subtle. Justice hadn't forced her change. He hadn't asked her to. He had simply been himself, quiet, empathetic, unassuming, and in that he had given her the space to grow. Their connection had become a source of strength for her, not just because of what he did, but because of the way he saw her. He didn't see her as the powerful CEO or the woman who had it all figured out. He saw her as someone struggling, someone who was learning to open up, someone who was finally letting herself be human. And now, for the first time in years, Evelyn felt like she was standing on solid ground. Not because everything was perfect, but because she had learned that imperfection was part of the journey. And she didn't have to do it alone. "I've realized something," she said, her voice steady now. "I've spent so much time focusing on control that I forgot to live. I forgot to feel, to be present, to be okay with not having all the answers. And your kindness, has taught me that." Justice smiled, the lines around his eyes softening with quiet pride. "Kindness has a way of healing," he said, his voice tinged with humility. "But you were always capable of it. You just needed to see it." Evelyn shook her head, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. "I think I've spent so much of my life thinking that I had to fix everything, that I had to be perfect. But now, I see that it's the imperfections that make us who we are. They make us real." She paused, her heart full, and looked at him. "You've given me something I didn't know I needed, justice. And I'll never be able to thank you enough." He didn't respond with words, but his gentle gaze spoke volumes. The quiet understanding between them was more than enough. It was in the way he simply was, without any expectation or demand. It was in the space he held for her. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling more alive than she had in a long time. She had learned so much about kindness, about vulnerability, and about herself. She had learned that the strength she once thought she had to find in control could actually be found in letting go. And now, for the first time in a long time, she felt whole. True connection isn't about grand gestures. It's about the small things that make the biggest impact. What does real connection mean to you? If you're enjoying the story, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment with your thoughts on the power of kindness. Evelyn stood in the quiet of her office, a fresh cup of coffee in her hands, gazing out over the sprawling city below. The skyline that once symbolized everything she'd fought for, wealth, power, and control, now seemed to fade into the background, dwarfed by the new reality she was living. A reality that felt more authentic, more alive than the life she'd once clung to. She had learned more in the past few months than she had in the previous decade of her career. The lesson wasn't about business strategies or boardroom negotiations. No, this was something far deeper. It was about being present, about being human. It was about the realization that vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was her strength. In the past, Evelyn had built her empire on her ability to control every variable, every outcome. But now, she understood that letting go of control didn't mean losing everything. In fact, it meant gaining something far more precious, connection. And it wasn't just in her personal life where this transformation was unfolding. As a mother, Evelyn had finally begun to understand that love and trust were not to be given sparingly. With Lily, she had discovered a new way of being, a way of nurturing her daughter's needs without the overwhelming pressure to fix everything. Kindness and patience had become the foundation of their relationship, and with that, their bond had grown stronger than it had ever been. When Lily woke up each morning now, Evelyn didn't feel that crushing anxiety about whether she could manage the day. She had letting go at her side, a lesson learned not from a textbook or a therapist, but from justice, whose quiet kindness had reshaped the way Evelyn saw everything. It wasn't just about sleep, it was about being present in each moment, without fear of judgment or failure. But it wasn't just Lily's transformation that Evelyn noticed. Something had shifted inside of her as well. As she stood there, contemplating the skyline, she realized just how much of her previous life had been spent behind walls, emotional barriers she had put up to protect herself. From her husband's death to the demands of her career, she had kept everyone at arm's length, convinced that being open would only lead to more pain. But now, she was learning to trust again. She was learning to allow others in, to show her vulnerability without fear of weakness. And none of it would have been possible without justice. Justice, the man who had started as a silent figure, unseen by most of the world. He had walked into her life quietly, but with an impact far more profound than any professional consultant or expert could ever have had. His kindness was not transactional. It was pure, unassuming, and unconditional. It was this generosity of spirit that had begun to heal Evelyn, and not just Evelyn, Lily too. The door to her office creaked open, and Evelyn turned to see Justice standing there. His usual presence was both a comfort and a reminder of just how far she had come. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm but without the weight of expectation. "I thought I'd check in before your meeting." "Thank you," Evelyn replied, a smile pulling at her lips. "I always appreciate it." Justice smiled back, but this time Evelyn noticed something else in his eyes, a reflection of understanding that went beyond simple acts of kindness. There was gratitude there too, but also something deeper, healing. He had been through so much, losing his wife, raising Ella alone, and surviving the emotional wounds that had left him silent for years. But now, it seemed as though he had found a piece of peace in his connection with her, with Lily. It was subtle, but Evelyn could see it in the way he held himself, the way he wasn't just existing in the background anymore. He was part of their lives, fully integrated, not as an invisible figure, but as someone who mattered. "You know, I've been thinking," Evelyn said, her voice quieter now. She stepped closer to Justice, the weight of her words making her heart flutter. "You've done more than help me with Lily. You've helped me understand something important, something I didn't realize I needed to learn. Kindness, justice. It's the way we heal. It's the way we connect. I've been so focused on doing everything myself, on fixing everything, that I forgot how powerful it is to let someone in." Justice listened intently, his gaze never leaving hers. He wasn't surprised. He had always known how transformative the smallest gestures of kindness could be. "I think," she continued, "I was so afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of being seen as weak, as incapable. But now, I see that I've been running from the very thing that could heal me. I built these walls around myself, thinking they kept me safe, but all they did was isolate me." There was a pause, and in that silence, Evelyn felt the weight of all that she had been carrying, years of grief, of holding on too tightly, of pushing people away. And she realized that justice had been the key to unlocking all of it. Not with grand gestures, but with simple, everyday acts of kindness. His presence had been enough. "You've taught me more than I ever expected to learn," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You show me that I don't have to fix everything to make it right. And I don't have to do it alone." Justice nodded, his expression soft. "You never were alone, Evelyn. You just needed to see it." It wasn't just Evelyn who had changed. Justice, too, had found redemption. For so long, he had lived in the shadow of his own grief, pushing through the pain of losing his wife and raising his daughter alone. But in helping Evelyn, he had begun to realize that his grief no longer defined him. His acts of kindness, so freely given, had become a way for him to heal as well. He was no longer the invisible janitor in the background. He was now a pivotal figure in Evelyn and Lily's lives, someone who had not only helped them heal, but had healed himself in the process. Evelyn knew in that moment that their connection wasn't just about her and Lily anymore. It was about both of them, the three of them, learning to heal together, to trust together, and to embrace the healing power of kindness. Transformation can be messy, but the reward is always worth it. What has kindness taught you about change? I'd love to hear how kindness has shaped your journey. Comment below, and don't forget to like if this story is inspiring you to embrace vulnerability. The soft light of the late afternoon filtered through the windows of Evelyn's apartment, casting a warm glow over the room. The city outside was quiet, the bustle of the workday ebbing into the calm of the evening. Inside, there was an altogether different kind of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from achieving success, from closing deals, or finalizing contracts. It wasn't the peace that came from control or perfection. No, this was the kind of peace that came from connection, from knowing that you weren't alone, even when the world seemed vast and overwhelming. Evelyn watched as Justice sat on the couch beside Lily, both of them laughing at something silly she had said. The sight of them together, sharing a moment of pure joy, made Evelyn's heart swell. Not long ago, she had never imagined such a scene. She had been a woman drowning in responsibilities, struggling to keep afloat in a world that demanded constant performance. But now, she saw something entirely different, a new dynamic, one built on trust, mutual support, and kindness. Justice had become an integral part of their lives, more than just someone who helped soothe Lily's troubled nights. He was a constant presence, someone who offered not just physical assistance, but emotional support. The bond that had begun with small, simple acts of kindness had grown into something far more meaningful. They were a family now, not one bound by blood, but one that had been forged through shared experiences and mutual care. Evelyn stepped into the living room, quietly watching the two of them. She couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just the way they interacted, it was the way she saw Justice now. He wasn't the janitor who had once been invisible to her, a figure she had barely noticed. He was someone who had transformed her life, someone who had, without even trying, shown her the power of being vulnerable, the power of kindness. "Mom," Lily's voice cut through her thoughts. "Look at what Justice taught me." She jumped up from the couch, holding a drawing in her hand. Evelyn looked at the sketch, one of her, Lily, and Justice, drawn with crayons in bright, childlike strokes. It wasn't a masterpiece, but the warmth of it struck Evelyn straight in the heart. There they were, captured in a simple, joyful moment, a reminder of just how far they had all come. "I love it," Evelyn said, kneeling to hug Lily tightly. Lily beamed, her face lighting up. Justice said we should always keep drawing together. He said it helps make the happy times last. Evelyn looked at Justice, who was still sitting on the couch, a small smile on his face as he watched Lily's excitement. He hadn't said much, but it was clear he had found his place in their lives, just as they had found a place in his. "Thank you," Evelyn said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "You've done more than I could ever express. You've changed everything for us." Justice met her gaze, his expression serene. "I just showed up, Evelyn. But you opened up. That's the real change." The simplicity of his words struck Evelyn like a wave. She had been so focused on keeping control, on doing everything herself, that she had forgotten how much it mattered to allow others in, to accept the help and kindness offered. And in doing so, she had discovered something more precious than all the success and control in the world. "Do you realize what you've done for us?" Evelyn whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "You've given us something I didn't know we needed. A family." Justice gave a small, humble nod. "We all need something to hold on to," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "And sometimes the thing that holds us together is kindness." Evelyn stepped back, her heart swelling with gratitude. There was so much she wanted to say, but the words felt inadequate. Instead, she took Lily's hand, and they both turned to Justice. The three of them stood there for a moment, just holding each other's gaze, connected in a way they never had been before. "Thank you," Evelyn said again, this time with more finality. "For everything." Justice smiled, but there was something different in the way he held himself. The quiet man who had once been invisible had now become the foundation of their small but important family. He had found his redemption, not by seeking recognition, but by quietly offering kindness and allowing it to heal both himself and those around him. Evelyn understood now that true strength didn't come from standing alone. It came from the courage to let others in, to embrace vulnerability, and to allow kindness to flow freely between people. It was a lesson she had learned through Justice's quiet actions, and one that would stay with her forever. As she looked at him now, Evelyn realized that the love they had built together wasn't something that could be measured by material success. It wasn't something she could control or perfect. It was simply there, existing in every moment of shared trust and support. Later that evening, as the three of them sat down to dinner, Evelyn couldn't help but reflect on the journey they had all been through. The pain, the healing, the small acts of kindness that had brought them here. The transformation that had happened in all of them. And for the first time in her life, Evelyn felt that the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to embrace, because she now knew that she didn't have to face it alone. With Justice by her side, and Lily, of course, she felt like anything was possible. Building a new life, a new family, takes trust and love. How do you nurture supportive relationships in your life? Let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying Evelyn and Justice's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay abreast of new stories that we drop every day.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.